Now it's on. Okay, Zokta Gemara. So we are at 2 dots at the bottom of our base. Yesterday we learned the story how Avdon said something sharp, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosy, who shot back and said that I have a right to walk over the head of the Talmidim because I'm delivering important information that Tzibur needs me, because I'm telling everybody that a Ketana can do Yibum. There's no reason to check to see if this woman is a Gedolah or not, and therefore you don't have to check. L'maisa, the Gemara said that we paskin Acha Tovich Cyrus, she has to be an adult. Okay. We also learned the halacha that you need to have 3 dayanim there, and 3 is good. You don't need 5 by the Ma'aseh Chalitzah. So now we're up to another very interesting story. The Mishnah told us in the discussion of whether or not you need to have 3 dayanim there about a story where a couple was in jail, and it wasn't a couple. It was a Yevama and a Yavam, a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law. And you did Chalitzah Beinoi Leveino with no one there. And they went to Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva said that the Chalitzah is a good Chalitzah. So Frank Gemara, if it's Beinoi Leveino, which is 4 lines from the bottom of Daf with him with base, Miyodana, then who knows about it? So it's assumed that for sure you need to have Eidim. Amar Rabbi Yudam Shmuel, the Eidim Roina Son Mibachutz. Eidim saw from a distance, but they weren't part of the transaction. They weren't right there. So the shaila over here is, what is the purpose of the Eidim? There's actually a machlokes in the Rishonim if it's Eidei Re'iyah that you need. In other words, who would be able to prove? They're not believed to come along and say that we did Chalitzah. You need Eidim to say that, in fact, that this lady is Mutar L'Shuk. There are those who learn that this is Eidei Kiyum. Just like by Kedushin, you need Eidei Kiyum. The Eidim actually affect the transaction. They make the Chalois. Without the Eidim, it won't happen. So there's actually a shayla over here by the Chalitzah if you require Eidei Kiyum, or if this is just Eidei Re'iyah, which is Eidim that testify this is what happened. Well, that was the question, right? So Rabbi Akiva held you don't need one, at least with the Yevid, and we don't pass on that, right? We said Ein Halacha Oisei Azug, like we learned in the earlier shtickle, you actually need 3. So this whole story is Shaloi Ali b'Dehilchos. Now we have another interesting story. Let's just turn back for a second to the Mishnah and look at the story as it's related in the Mishnah itself. The Mishnah itself says, Umaisa be'echot shechalatz beinoi leveino bebeis asur. Uva ma'isa l'fnei Rabbi Akiva. Uva ma'isa l'fnei Rabbi Akiva sounds like it's the ma'isa happened in jail, and then they went to Rabbi Akiva in the Beis Medrash to ask him what's the halacha about this story that happened in jail. Tosfos takes the vav out. Tosfos says, Ma'isa be'echot shechalatz beinoi leveino, comma. The Arveis Asurim Bo Ma'aseh L'fnei Rabbi Akiva, and they asked Rabbi Akiva what to do, and Rabbi Akiva was in jail. The Hichshir, and he said it's kosher. So the question is, was the couple in jail, or was Rabbi Akiva in jail? And Tosfos explains that in our Mishnah it's clear that the couple was in jail. The question is, was Rabbi Akiva also in jail? So let's see what how the Gemara expresses the shayla. The shows can fill jails. There are a lot of jails. Right. So we're going to see. Right. So we'll see. Exactly. So we'll see. We're going to see in Tosfos. Iboilo. Ma'isa shechaltu beinoi leveino was Avroi happened out of jail. Ubamaitel of Rabbi Akiva beis asurin. Is that what happened? Or Dilma Ma'isa shechaltu beinoi leveino was beis asurin as well. Zok Gemara Amar V'Yudam beis asurin hayamaisa ulebeis asurin b'maisa. The psak was in jail, and the story happened in jail. Let's see Tosfos. Ubamasel of Rabbi Akiva beis asurin. Mimtav fake Tosfos. Ubamasnisin masha behedja shechaltu beis asurin. The Katani Maisa shechaltu beinoi leveino beis asurin. So clearly the Maisa was in jail. Ubamasel of Rabbi Akiva. Yeshloimar the Baharbis Forum Grasinon Bamaisel of Rabbi Akiva beloiva. The Kainami beis asurin are Rabbi Akiva. The Beis Asurin is also referring to Rabbi Kiva. Frank Toyses, in time Arbechi Pashut Shemaisa Baluf the Rabbi Kiva Beis Asurin, V'loy Bavroi. How could the Gemara even have a Havamin? That this story happened in front of Rabbi Kiva, but it didn't have. And how can the Gemara be sure that the story happened to Rabbi Kiva in jail and not outside? Yesh Leimar, because the Gemara was pushing at the end that in fact Rabbi Kiva was in jail. How do you know that? Yesh Leimar the Yedei HaGemara Shabal Lefonav Bebeis Asurim. The Gemara knows this Shaila came to him in jail. Now, how could they possibly have asked him a Shaila in jail if he put him into jail for teaching Torah? You put a guy in jail for teaching Torah, now he's going to teach Torah in jail? Oh, so Zog Tais is a beautiful Yerushalmi that described the code language with which they used to ask the Shaila. Kedamri Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler was involved. He went Avar Kumei Chavushin to Rabbi Kiva. He went past the jail of Rabbi Kiva and he acted like he was a peddler. Hoyo Machriz Omar, he announced, Man boy Machtin, who needs needles? Ma boy Tzinurin, who needs pegs? So the person listening understood the first two parts of the statement. So they didn't make anything of the last thing, which was a Shaila Lalocha. It's like when I go to customs. Good morning, Mr. Customs. How are you today? On the lagging or the bagging? How will you say? No, but they don't have what you're saying, right? Because you just you say some things in English and then you slip in a couple of words that they don't understand. So that's exactly what happened. Mao. So what happened was Mao. That's the child that was asked. On the Claresha min kavase. I guess he stuck his head out. I don't know what that means exactly. Omar, he said, Isla Chushin, do you have these types of items? And then he says, Isla Chosher. So they disguised the question and the answer in code language, like when we were in yeshiva. I'm making a collect call to mommy. From who? From Chalil or from Reef Zirik, right? Our little tricks that we do aren't new tricks. In the Gemara times, they had those tricks already. I guess Rahim wasn't a flight risk.
How do we know? The answer is we know. Usually.
No, but look at the math. Also by looking at the question. This question.
Okay, so let's see the Gemara. Tell me about Chalitzah Muta, a mistaken Chalitzah. Ksheir is kosher. What is the Chalitzah Muta? Ezahu Chalitzah Mutas. What is a mistaken Chalitzah? Amar Shlachish Kol Sha'imrim Loi. Let's say we want to convince this guy to do Chalitzah. We want to convince him. And he might not want to do Chalitzah. So we tell him, I guess he's an Amoritz, we tell him, do this activity, and that's how you are koinish this Yevamos. What's the procedure for being koinish this Amana? Do the Chalitzah process. So he's doing it thinking that he's being koiner. In the meantime, we got him, and now he released it. I don't understand, how could you have a Havamina that if he's doing this action, Amanas to be koinisher, that should be a good Chalitzah? Anisha, I learned, and we had it earlier. If each of them don't have kavana, we said either for the mitzvah or kavana to be kind of her, kavana to release her, for her to be kind of herself, the chalitza is possible. Until they're both mechaven to release her. You're going to tell me that when someone is doing chalitza with the intention that the chalitza is being koinish dalman, which is for sure not a good kavana for chalitza, and it's going to be a good chalitza, that cannot be what chalitza mutas is. Because such a chalitza for sure would not be a good chalitza. If they tell him, you give her chalitza, he doesn't want to give chalitza. You give chalitza, you'll see. If you give chalitza, she's going to pay you 200 zuz. So they want to pay him off to do chalitza. That's going to work. But you don't pay matzah. The reason why it's mutter is because you don't pay matzah. You convince him. You say, we'll pay you. And then after he does the chalitza, you say, too bad. Tanya we learned, Tanya Mamihachi, chalitza mutas ksheira. A chalitza that was done by mistake because he expected to get paid off. He's kosher. Eja chalitza mutas, kosher oimrim, chalitza almanah, shetit milach, masa'im zuz. So now let's have a look at Rashi. Why is the Tanai not a good night? If he made a Tanai and give you a Chalitza Almanas, that you're going to give me 200 Jews, why is it that that doesn't prevent the Chalitza from working? So let's see Rashi. Rashi gives us a Yisodistic halacha. Where do we know, from where in the Torah do we know that a Tanai works? We know it from the Tanai of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuben. What happened? Moshe Rabbeinu made a Shliach Yeshua to take Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael and to distribute Eretz Yisrael to Klal Yisrael. And what happened was Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuben, they said, and Chatzim Nasher, they said, we don't want to have our land in Eretz Yisrael proper. We want Jordan as our land. We need Maroon. We have a lot of sign. There's not enough mirrors for our sign. We want to stay in Transjordan. So Moshe Rabbeinu made a deal with them. If you first come and help conquer Klal Yisrael on behalf of your brothers, then we'll give you the chelik as you asked in Jordan. But if you don't come and conquer, you won't. So that was the Tanai. And from there we learned that a Tanai works. But it only works in cases that can be compared to what happened when the Chalukas are. So let's see what Rashi says. Even though she does not fulfill the Tanai, we're going to learn the two Ksubas. The whole Tanai, Bnei Gad u'Bnei Reuven Gamrinan. Every Tanai we learn from Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. And one of the things we learn is Tanah she'efshir lasos al yidei shliach. It has to be an activity that can be done through a shliach, because the activity of distributing the land, which is the makar for Tanoim, is from Sha'asa Moshe Yeshua Shliach Loses Lahem Etzeres HaGilad. That how the Tanoi Tano. But the whole night the Loyev Shalasis Holiday Shliach going Chalitzah ain't Tanaim Oilbo. Kedushin, you could appoint somebody to make a kedushin for you. You could even appoint somebody to make a get for you. Chalitza you have to do by yourself. You cannot have someone else do chalitza. The zeo time is so dober as a Rashi. That's the reason why a Tanai does not work under a chalitza. I'm sorry. Someone else could pay. That's true. But that's not his shliach. That's her shliach. The Tanai was that, yeah, but the Tanai will only impact. The Tanai will only impact a ma'aseh that could be done by a shliach. So Zog to Gemara, so all you need to learn from here is make sure they prepay. Because if they don't prepay, you have no way of enforcing it, because the chalitza will be kosher. A woman fell to Ibam, to a brother-in-law who was not appropriate for her. He was a scoundrel, and she didn't want to be married to him. And we told her, we told him because we wanted to scam him out of his chalitza. They told him, do the chalitza, don't worry, she's going to pay you Masayim Zuz. And the Maisa came in front of Reb Chia, and he was Masher, the chalitza, and he was Masher who was shook. We had a similar story. I said over to Abduru how the Abduru was born. He was born through a chalitza, where the sister-in-law promised to give a lot of money, but the person doing the chalitza would refuse to take the money. It was absent. That was Abduru's father. Hahuda also lakamei. Yeah, that's a whole story. I don't want to get into it now. Hahuda also lakamei Reb Chia by Abba. Someone who came in front of Reb Chia by Abba. Omerla, biti amoidi. Stand here and do yibum. In other words, participate in the yibum. Omerla Ema, her mother was standing there and says, the erste Bride genommen von den Eiden. In der Chanisha so geweint bei der Lavai. Das zweite Bride willst du doch auch geben von den Eiden? No, I don't think so. I don't want this evil. The mother said, Yeshivasa zuhi amidasa. By her sitting down and refusing to do yibum, that's going to be what's best for her. Because this mother-in-law realized that this brother-in-law toignish. Amar Allah, he told her, Yada Slay, you know this guy? Well, he's a problem. Amar Lay, I don't know him so well, but I know one thing about him. In Mamana Hu the Chazala the Kavayim Lemilchamina. He knows that my daughter has a lot of money, and all he's interested in is stealing all her money. And after he burns through all her money, he's going to kick her out and divorce her. So that's not really going to be good for my daughter. So therefore, I don't want this yibum to occur. Omar law. So he confirmed and he looked at the woman herself, the alman herself, and he asked her, "Loy nichalach, you don't want to do yibum with this man?" Omar lay loy, I don't want to do yibum. Omar lay. So he turned to the brother-in-law, who had dollar signs in his eyes, and his eyes were spinning around like the dials on a slot machine. Omar lay. He told him, "Chalitzah, do chalitzah, uvekach ata chalitza." And the ma'aseh chalitza that you're going to do, that's how you want. This guy was nice and amoris. If you want to be kindness to her, you want to marry her, the way you do it is through this activity. Levasa the chalitzah, after he did it, Amr Loi, he told this fellow, Hashta minach ifsalala. The fact that you did this chalitza now makes it possible to you. You might not have the matter l'shuk because it's not a kosher chalitza, but you've disqualified yourself from being able to marry her anymore. So you might as well chalitza mal yasa kiheiche de tishrei la'alma. So she become mutar l'shuk. So the Rishonim speak about it, and they say a chalitza without any kavana, we learned earlier, will not answer her to him. It was the Rav lied to him. The Rav told him that you can't marry her, you might as well give her chalitza. It was all a way to extract a chalitza from this fellow who would have otherwise given them a very hard time. Okay, Bas Chamua de Rapapa, the daughter of the mother-in-law of Rapapa. So I would say that's his sister-in-law, right? It's his wife's sister. To me, I think that's what the article said. Bas Chamua is the daughter of his mother-in-law. So it was a sister-in-law. It wasn't good at all. Because it was done without kavanah. He did it with kavanah. He thought that was being kindness.
And is the reason because it was against the kavuna or because it wasn't?
It's because it wasn't the kavuna. It wasn't the. We looked earlier. It doesn't work at all. Well, it doesn't even work to answer her. In the Friedrich Masa, he made a t'nai for money. Yeah, that's a proper chalitza, and the t'nai doesn't work because it's not doimit to bnei Gad of bnei Reuben. So let's see what happened. So the sister-in-law of a papa, naflo from Yevamos, she'ein hagama. Also l'kamei d'Abaye. They came to Abaye, and your papa was sort of the advocate. He was supporting his sister-in-law. Omer lei. So they told him, Chalitzah, do chalitza, ubekach at the kodesh. That was Abaye's solution to scam the guy into doing chalitza. Amalei Rav Papa told Abaye, "Are you sure? Don't you hold of what Rabbi Yochanan said that this is not a good kavana and therefore it won't be a chalitza at all?" What should I tell him? Amalei Rav Papa suggested. Rav Papa was a sharp guy and he knew how to make things happen. Tell him, tell him that you do chalitza, that I'll pay you 200 zuz.
No, because when I couldn't, that's why I couldn't.
That's why he came to get involved.
He couldn't decide.
That's why I couldn't. Okay, good. Levasa the chalitzah, after the husband did chalitza, Amar law, so Abaye said, Zil Havle. So now pay him the money that you promised. And Rashi says, you don't need a t'nai. And you don't need a t'nai. Her chalitza is good whether or not she pays or not. But the fact is, she said she was going to pay. So if you said you're going to pay, why don't you fulfill your words? Amarlei, Abaye told Abaye, what are you talking about? Mishata anibach, obviously. She scammed him. She never intended to be Machayim herself to pay. She was just scamming him. Milay Tanya, did we not learn? Somebody was running away from people who were going to capture him. And there was a bridge or a boat or some way to get over the river to get away from his captors. And he needed to get over the bridge. And the normal fare to pay to get over the bridge, the toll for the bridge or the fare for the ferry would have been a pruta, a very low amount. But he wanted to make sure that they would take him right away. So he said, "Tell dinner." He offered them 100 times the normal fare so that he should be able to get right over. Rainy, get me over this river. The halacha is ein lo yalasforai. he only has to pay, even though he promised a dinner, he only has to pay what the fair value of that trip is. Alma, you see from here, if someone promises way more than the value of what something is worth to escape an emergency, he couldn't say Mishatani Bach. Hachanami here too, she's trying to escape being locked into being married to this monster. She could say Mishatani Bach. Amar Le'avua, Amar Le. If there is an official express fee, you would have to pay. But if there's no official express fee, then you don't have to pay. And the svara is, the Rishonim tell us, is because be'emes, if my life is in danger, you're mechuyev to help me. If a lion's running after me and you could save me, you're mechuyev to help me. Yes, I got to pay you for your bullets. I have to pay for a killing service. But you're mechuyev to help me. So therefore, I only have to pay the value of it. But I have to pay the value of it because that much I owe you. But I don't have to pay you any extra because you saved me, because you're mechuyev to save me anyway. So when Abaye saw you, you're a sharp guy. You know how you became so sharp? Because you were able to sit and learn ala Torah, ala Avodah without any daggers of parnasa. I wish I had that. Abaye was a Yosy. It's a chemitzah. Rav Papa had it easy. So I'm like, where's your father? B'masa. Where's your mother? B'masa. And Abaye said, you must have good financial support that you could be so clear and sharp in your learning. So what happened? Abaye wasn't trying to punish anybody. Abaye wasn't trying to hurt anybody. Just the mere fact that he had like a tinge of envy that Rav Papa had it so easy and was able to sit and learn so much, and he didn't. That created exardin on them, and they made him die. Abaye? Yeah, maybe eventually he became rich, but he
always got the bad association.
Because he paid more.
I said, because I paid him, and you didn't.
So who said he had money? He paid.
No, she said it.
But could be Abaye became wealthy, but his upbringing was very, very poor. So there's a such. So what's the halacha? What's the halacha if someone is desperate for a certain medicine, and the doctor overcharges you for the medicine? In those days, it was the doctor who gave the medicine. They didn't have a special pharmacy. That was different. So the halacha is you're only mechuyev to pay the value of the medicine. But what if a doctor wants to charge you an exorbitant amount for diagnostics? There you have to pay, because the chachma is valued. He has the right to put a number on what his chachma is worth, and therefore you mechuyev to pay him. Because even when someone's being mavriach and ari, which is mechuyev to do anyway, all that does is it says that you only have to pay the fair value of the service. So drugs which have a fair value, that's all you have to pay. But medical advice, there is no fair value, and you'd have to pay the doctor whatever he asks for.
No, you have to strong the medicine, but it's not a fair value.
But it's market value. It's market value, yeah. But they do charge a lot in the market. In Chanami. Right? There's a famous story with a guy who had a problem with a ship that had a problem with making noises. So they called this big engineer, and he walks. And first they called everybody. They spent tons of money. They couldn't resolve the problem. Then they called this big engineer. He says, "I want $20,000. I can fix it for you." So he goes to the ship. He looks around, takes out a hammer. He gives a clap, and the whole problem goes away. And they said, "You're going to charge us $20,000 for the clap?" He says, "No, the clap I threw in for free. The $20,000 is for all my experience and knowledge that I knew exactly how to clap and where to clap." Exactly. So a chiropractor can charge you whatever you want. Tell me about Chalitzah mutas ksheira. Chalitzah mutas, which we've already established, which was based on a tanai that he wasn't a queen, will be a kosher anyway. But get muta possible. If someone makes a tanai on a get and the get isn't fulfilled, that get will be possible. Chalutza mu'usas sula. If you force someone to do chalitza, that will be possible. But get mu'usa, if you force someone to do a get, it will be kosher. Hey Chadam, what's the case where a mu'usa is possible? By chalitza, yet good by get. Idam roitzani. If at the end he said roitzani, the koifa nois yatzuyim roitzani, I feel the chalitza nami, so the chalitza would also be valid. The loyam roitzani, if he didn't say I want to, get nami loy. Chalitza mutas la'olam kosher. A chalitza mutas is always kosher. The get mutas is like the apostle. But chalitza meusis, the get meusa, zimnin kosher, zimnin pasul. Sometimes it's kosher, sometimes it's pasul. When is it kosher? How do I write on it? When it's a pasul, at layam write on it. The Tanya, Yaakov Yosy. This concept of kovenos yachim write on it is said by karbonos. Someone was mechuyven a carbon. He was not in a carbon, and he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to bring his carbon. So Bezin could force him and extract the carbon out of him. You might think you make him bring the carbon against his will. So how can it be forced and be l'tzaynai at the same time? You force him until he says he's willing. And the Rambam says, because every Yid really wants to do the Ratzon Hashem, and deep down inside, that's what his true intention is. Narvas Yitzhar creates layers and layers and layers. With a little bit of convincing, you peel away those layers. You're allowed to preside over a chalitza, even though it's not clear that this is the Yavam and this is the Yevamos. You're allowed to preside over a meal. Even though we're not sure that this is the husband, this is the wife. But leficha, since Bezin doesn't have to confirm at the time that they're husband and wife, ain't kosvin get chalitza ella imkain makir. You cannot write a star that said that this woman got chalitza unless the person, the Aiden on the star, know for sure that it's the right man and the right woman. And the same thing of the ain't kosvin get million ella imkain makir. Why? The chashinan lebezin toyin. If Bezdin knows that just because a chalitza occurred without independent proof that this is the right man and right woman, they can't be matter. Therefore, we don't let anybody write a star that was done, because the Bezdin might not realize that the star doesn't really help until they verify that it was the right characters there. This is exactly like the case of get lost. Right, writing your star to the get is only a good star if you know for sure it was done properly. But for Rava the Day Amar, Rava himself said, so this is Rava saying it in the name of Rav Schreier of Huna. But if one of them is not the right person, so you can't be matzah, right? But Rava the Day Amar, you never allow a chalitza to occur unless the bezin can verify with certainty that you have the right people there. Get chalitza, therefore you could write a get chalitza, even though the person writing the get and the person signing it doesn't know, but you can rest assured that if you saw this occur in Bezdin, you could be rest assured that Bezdin made sure that these are the right people. Because you get me on Alpishem Akirin, but like Hashila Bezdin Tain, we're not concerned that the original Bezdin who did the chalitza weren't careful to make sure that the chalitza was done with the right people. Now we're at the last mission in the parak. Mitzvah's chalitza, and they make a big deal out about mitzvah's chalitza. Their Rishonim will hold that the chalitza is in fact a mitzvah. It's not just a matir. And one of the mikoros is this mishnah, mitzvah's chalitza. It's a mitzvah's chalitza. There are those who learn that not only is the whole parsha of Yibum and chalitza one mitzvah, but two separate mitzvahs. Chalitza is a mitzvah on its own, and again they derive from the mishnah because it says mitzvah's chalitza. So now we learned all about chalitza. And so what is the procedure? What exactly happens? Now we're going to get a step-by-step guide of how it's done. Mitzvah chalitza. Bohu v'yivim to the bezdin. This is the script for the video. Bohu v'yivim to the bezdin. The brother-in-law and sister-in-law come to bezdin. Ve'ein masiyin lo'etzai geneslei. First, bezdin consults with him to determine what's right for him. And if they determine that chalitza is the right way to go, then they do it. So we learn from V'karula and V'dibru Elav that they give him an eita of what's appropriate for him. And they decide that chalitza is the way to go. So she begins by saying, and they tell her to repeat after me. As Shmuel once told me, hurry up, right? So they say, repeat after me. Me'ein Yevami lahakim la'ach b'shem b'Yisrael lo'ovayab. After she says that, then they tell him, repeat after me. And this part that we've just discussed, with these psukim, are all Lashon HaKodesh. They read the words of the Torah, and she repeats the words of the Torah, and he repeats the words of the Torah after that. Then, then the Yevama comes to the oven. And she removes his shoe from his foot. She spits in front of him, and it has to be roik hanira l'dayanim, roik that can be seen by the dayanim. Now, those who learn it even means roik. We can see the Gemara. It means that the not only do they have to see the saliva, they have to see her spinning. The ansav amra, and then she says again, and they stop over there. Up until this point, they would read and she would read after them. But nothing else has to be said. However, when Hyrcanus was making a chalitzah under this, I think it was an elm tree. I think the Arshbar touches it as an elm tree in Kfar, and it could be this reassures what we learned earlier, that for chalitzah they have to designate a place. The Gomer has called a parsha. He finished the whole parsha. He didn't just do the psukim that are mentioned in our Mishnah. He had them say the whole parsha. Since then, Huchsku Liya is Goyim called a parsha. V'nikra Shmoi B'Yisrael, which is the end of the pasuk. V'nikra Shmoi B'Yisrael Beis Chalutzanal. That's mitzvah b'dayanim. The dayanim have to say Beis Chalutzanal. V'loi mitzvah b'talmidim. I'm sorry. I think it's still Chalutz B'Yisrael. I'm not sure. Does it go fresh? Does the parsha go further? I think that's in the parsha. V'yidomer mitzvah al kol ha'oimdim sham loimer Chalutzanal. The mitzvah is anyone telling there to say Chalutzanal, and that's l'fershum milsa to be mefarshim. Zok te'ilek gemara. Amar vida mitzvah chalitza kaira v'kairei. She says that he says v'chayletzes that she does chalitza v'roikika. Then she spits, and then the kaira, and then she says kachayel. My kamash malon. What is the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda? Masnisani. Didn't we just learn this in the Mishnah? How kamash malon that mitzvah hachi? It's only a mitzvah lechatchila. But if it was done out of order, last lonba, it would still be a good chalitza. Tanya mihaki, bein shektim chalitza rekika, bein shektim rekika lechalitza masha asa also. It still works with the eved. Amar Abaye, Haiman demakri get chalitza. The person who is officiating and he's reading the words for her to repeat after, lelikri lidida loy lechudei v'avayavna lechudei. It says loy avayavna. So you shouldn't pause. You shouldn't say loy, comma, avayavni, because that would be mashma, the mashma avayavni. It would be mashma that he wants to do yibum, because the loy is not connected. Loy, he's not refusing, rather avayavni. So therefore, he should read it without pausing in between. Ela loy avayavni. And the same thing when he's reading for the man. First loy l'chudei, and then chafatzti l'chudei. The mashma loy, no chafatzti l'kachta, I want her. Ella loy chafatzti l'kachta, I don't want her. Rabba said, if suki milsahi, which is one girsa, that merely pausing in the middle of a sentence is not an issue. If suki milsa, less lamba. And the Bach changes the girsa to asuke milsa. It's just finishing off a phrase, and there's no problem even if there's a pause. He saw that Rav Kahana was mitchening sich to make sure to pronounce it exactly perfect so that there should be no pause or perceived pause between loy and avayavni. Amar Lai, so Abaye told him, don't you hold like Rabba who said Afsuka Milsu, it's not a big deal, you don't have to worry about it? Amar Lai, Moide Rabba below avayavni. Rabba was just saying it doesn't matter by the rest of the psukim that we listed for him. But the loy avayavmi, that even Rabba is makbar on, and that's why Rav Kahana, I'm concerned to be makbar on. No, if you didn't say anything, it would be good anyway. We learned the Farish Mishnah that if you skip the whole Kriya, it's no problem. But if you're doing it, you want to do it right. Right? We even learned the Kodesh Rebbe out the spit. Amar Abaye. Haiman the cause of Gita, the Chalitzah, if you're writing a get Chalitza, meaning you're writing a testimony of what occurred, this is what you should write. Akrinua l'dida, I read for her. No, you're writing a play-by-play of what occurred. I read for her min me'ein Yevami ad avayami, but you don't actually write out the entire pasuk that you read. You just mark. You just write. I started from here and I finished over here. So you don't have 4 consecutive words of the Torah in your star. You're not allowed to write 4 consecutive words of the Torah in your star. Vakrino today min loy ad lakachta. Then vakrino lidah, and then afterwards I read for her weiter min kacha until ad chaloy now. The reason why you shouldn't write out the whole pasuk just where you started and where you finished is because Allah is, if you write 4 words of the Torah, you have to write it on a cloth that has the proper preparation, as if you were writing Torah, and that means you need sirtut. You have to make lines, but therefore you should avoid writing 4 words together, because then you'll need sirtut. That's right. Marzutra mesartit the cost of the chula parsha. Marzutra would make sirtut, and he would actually write what I said word for word. You're not supposed to be writing the Torah, so why would you write the whole thing? You shouldn't write it at all. But the hilchazak of us is the marzutra. Nevertheless, we pass like marzutra that you make sirtut and you write out the whole thing properly. Amar Bai, Rakaka v'kal tasa yarua. What happened if she spit towards him, but it didn't go towards him? The wind pushed the saliva in a different direction. That's not going to be a good pratika. Again, if you hold like Rabbi Kiva, you don't need it anyway. But if you want to do it right, it won't work. My timer, the yarka b'fana b'ima. You have to. It says she has to spit in front of him, towards him. So it has to be towards him. It has to be in front of him. Hilchach. Therefore, if hu harach v'higutza, what if he's a very tall man and she's short? The moment the saliva comes out of her mouth, it's in front of him. Even though kol tasei ruach ika b'fanav, at that moment when it was in the air, it was in front of him. But here, if she's taller than him, it's important that the saliva falls down so it should be in front of him. And therefore, if it blows away right when it comes out of her mouth, it wouldn't work. It has to at least fall down to where it's within his height and then blow away. Yeah, that's right. You do that as well. Amarava, achla, tuma baraksa. If you eat garlic, it increases the saliva in your mouth. So it wasn't her natural saliva; it was saliva that was prompted from her eating this garlic. Or achla gargishta baraksa. She put a clump of earth into her mouth and then spit. That's disgusting. But it creates a saliva. Allah is that's not good saliva. My timer has to be her natural saliva. It can't be saliva that's prompted by either the garlic or by the gargishta. But I don't have that. Sorry? I guess it has to be from her natural glands, not from something that was prompted. The Amarava, Shrichi Dayani Lamechsi Ruka, Kinofik Mipuma de Yevama. It's not enough that they should just see the saliva, they actually have to see it leaving her mouth. The Chsivla Eine as a Canaan Viar. The Nikrish might be Yisrael based Chaluthanal, Mitzvah B'dayanim V'loi B'tamidim is what our Mishnah said. Tanya, we looked at Brisa. Amar Vida Pamachas Ayunu Yosy Notneir B'Tarfin. Uvasa Yevama Lachloitz and Yevama came to Chalitzah. Amar Lanu, and he told us, Anu Kulchem, all of you Talmidim sitting in the gallery watching, you should all announce Chalutah now, Chalutah now, Chalutah now. Oh, Baruch Hashem, we finished this. We finished the not to 12th parak. And Brunei there Hadin Allah Mitzvah Chalitzah, Hadin Allah Mitzvah Chalitzah, Hadin Allah Mitzvah Chalitzah. Tomorrow we're going to start Perek Beishamai. We're starting to close in. It's Perek Beishamai the last. No, we still have there's a lot of small parakim now. We have 4 more parakim, 13, 14, 15, 16, and it's all in about 12, 13 baht. So we're gonna have a Nishmak Perek after Perek. We have a wonderful, wonderful day.